The entire Grand Prix, this right here, I have to talk about it. I cannot be the only person who absolutely love this moment. Holy crap. I've been laughing for the last few days continuously because my goodness, this was special. This was just this is the funniest thing you could ever imagine. Okay, we need to be serious though. We need to talk about some other stuff. Ain't nothing gonna beat that unless you got this. You got Fumble Door. Sorry, Fumble Norris. Fumble Nor. That is unreal. Certain things you see at F1 is just unreal. But listen, to be even more serious, what did you guys think about the Bahrain Grand Prix? Fantastic job to Oscar Piastri. He did an incredible job winning that race. In a race where his teammate Lando Norris made so many mistakes. Incredible stuff from Oscar Piastri. This makes Oscar Piastri pretty much a real contender for the championship. And we can clearly see that the only real competition these McLaren drivers have is themselves. And every once in a while, they have to worry about a third driver, usually George Russell, Max Verstappen, maybe a Leclerc. But that Ferrari just isn't on pace with the McLaren as of yet. And I've definitely spoken about this before, just saying that, you know what? Do not underestimate that Mercedes. I've said it many times before that Mercedes, I expect them to be on pace with that McLaren by the end of the year. Before the end of the year. I expect it, and I don't expect them to give their all to this car. I just think Mercedes are gonna do what Mercedes do. They have a good car, good platform to build on. You cannot tell me that Mercedes car isn't a good car. The Mac and I've said this before, the Red Bull was typically either the second or third fastest car. And this weekend you can definitely see they were the fourth fastest car, which is why Max Verstappen was pretty much nowhere. So they're falling back and Ferrari has taken a step forward. So Ferrari is now soundly in third position. You can comfortably say it's McLaren, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull then. But this will change on a weekly basis. But the nice thing about Bahrain is why they use it as a test circuit. It's a good track to get a good idea of where everyone is. And the fact that Ferrari isn't fighting for the championship, it's not such a bad thing because let's think about it. If they were fighting for the championship, Charles Leclerc would have the clear advantage, having 6 years he spent in that Ferrari. Lewis has only driven that car for 4 races now. Even in testing, Lewis didn't have his final day in testing. And that was mostly, the plan was to have a race performance run, a race pace run, which is very crucial for him because that's his speciality. So imagine if that Ferrari was the fastest car on the grid, or even the second fastest car on the grid, competing for that championship. Charles competing for the championship, against the McLaren. The story would be very different. So the fact that they are not competing for the championship, this does give Lewis some time to adapt and to catch up. I don't see them fighting for the championship until probably next year or 2027. So this is good for Lewis. We always expected him to take some time to adapt to the car. We saw a great performance in the China Sprint Grand Prix. In qualifying in China, he outqualified Charles, and that was his second race in Ferrari. And even in this race, in this Grand Prix, he did struggle in the final parts of qualifying, which has been the story for the last year in 2024. It was Lewis mostly struggling in qualifying, particularly in Q3. Now, so far this year, I must say, we haven't seen Lewis struggle as much in qualifying as he did in the Bahrain GP. Let's be honest with ourselves. In Australia, he was like 2/10, just less than 2/10 away from Charles. That's pretty damn good. In China, he had qualified Charles. And where else have we raced? Oh yeah, in Japan. In Japan, once again, I think he was just, a few tenths behind Charles. Might have to look at the Japanese qualifying once again. There we go. There are the times. So Lewis was just a little bit over 3/10 away from Charles. It was a fairly close qualifying that weekend. But even Lewis can admit he did underperform. And a similar thing happened in Bahrain as well. Lewis slightly underqualified, or you can say majorly underqualified. He was quite a few tenths behind. So sure, there's a lot of things that is going on, but it's one thing I can say. Whenever he finds confidence in the car, he excels. And that's the same for every single driver on the grid. Without confidence in the car, you underperform, which is something that we've seen from other drivers. Even Norris underperformed in the Bahrain GP. In qualifying, he underperformed relative to his teammate. And Norris lacked confidence in himself and the car in qualifying, in particular in Bahrain. So when people saying, "Oh, this is an age thing for Lewis," not necessarily. Not necessarily. Especially if those people have never won a championship in their life, then you don't really know what it takes. But Lewis has basically said after the Bahrain GP, Lewis has said a few things. He said he's figured out how the car likes to be driven. We definitely saw in the Bahrain GP, especially when he was on the mediums, the second mediums. We saw a great performance from him and Charles. In the first stint, it wasn't the best, and in the final, on the hard tires, neither driver was able to fully extract that performance. So Lewis has some things to figure out. Ferrari also has some things to figure out. But I definitely think the car made a step this weekend. I definitely think they made a few improvements this weekend in that Ferrari car. It looks like they're bringing small upgrades instead of major upgrades. It looks like they're trying to fix one problem at a time instead of trying to fix everything all at once. And honestly, that's perhaps the best way to do that. And these were some quotes from Lewis, directly from Lewis himself. And I quote, "I think what is clear, us as humans, I guess we're really stuck in our ways." He reflected, "I've been driving a certain style in a certain way with the same team for such a long time. I've moved to a new car and it requires such a different driving style and settings." And I think the same can be said from the 2024 Mercedes car. F1 has gradually been changing, and Lewis has been here since 2007. It's only natural that, trying to keep up with the technology, it's a young man's game. It's not as if Lewis is getting slower, but the youth always have an advantage in figuring out these things. No matter how good you are at, Fortnite, your younger siblings will always be able to figure it out a lot faster, a lot easier. And that's just the way how things are in life. It doesn't make you a worse Fortnite player. It just simply means that, the youth, I'm telling you, the youth, it's one thing about being young that a lot of people can relate to, is that the youth, they learn so much easier and quickly. That's part of being youth. Youth often adapt better to situations also. So what we're seeing from Lewis is not a fact of him getting slower, it's more a fact of adaptability. I think this generation of drivers can adapt better to these cars because these cars are their generation of cars. Lewis' generation of cars were very different. Schumacher's generation of cars were different. The tires were different. My goodness, the tires are so different these days. The one thing that we constantly hear is that, the trick of qualifying is how do you not overheat your tires in that final sector. This is something that Lewis has been struggling with quite a lot. Lewis has a very aggressive style. We see that drivers like, Russell, Norris, they're very smooth on their operation when it comes to the overall driving of their vehicles. That can sometimes yield better results for tire management under one lap. However, tire management across a race distance, Lewis somehow still be able to, outshine his younger rivals. Lewis is not the same age as these guys anymore. These guys are young for a reason. They're made to adapt quickly and effortlessly as well. Effortlessly. And they're so much more hungry than Lewis is. So it's not a question of if Lewis is getting slower. I don't think so. It's just that the youth is always, in almost all sports, all genre, they're always able to adapt quicker, learn faster. It's just something that's how youth worked. I'm telling you. If you've ever played Fortnite since the 2017 days, and then you now play with your younger siblings, you're like, what the hell are these kids doing? They learn so quick, they adapt so quick. That's why it's best to teach children languages while they're young. Instead of trying to teach them these languages when they grow up. Teach them these languages when they're young. Their brain is built to intake information at rapid pace. So Lewis being 40, going 41 soon, I'm not surprised that he's struggling with these generation of cars. But what I am surprised of is Lewis fans asking for retirement. I've seen some Lewis fans genuinely ask for retirement. And these traitors, these absolute embarrassments, I don't know what their intentions are, but it's not in the best of interest for Hamilton. I do believe this is going to be difficult for Hamilton. This is going to be very difficult for Hamilton. Remember now, we spoke about this in one of our first videos. We spoke about the fact that these generation of cars, they're not built for the older drivers, like an Alonso, like a Lewis, like a Button, like a Rosberg. Okay, put back Vettel in these cars. Put Rosberg in these cars. Put Mark Webber in these cars. Put, the older drivers in these cars, the ones who've retired, and see how much they struggled. In fact, they struggled in their own generation of cars. Now imagine putting them in these new generation of cars. Imagine how much they would struggle. So I don't believe for a second Lewis is somehow just lost his talent. He's slow now. Absolutely not. I believe this is just one of the most unfortunate things about age is that, yeah, like he said, he's been driving a particular way with the same engine, same manufacturer for so long, and now everything is really, really different in Formula One, literally. We just came into new rule regulations recently in 2022. Now we're going into new rules regulation in 2026. It's not as simple as, adapting. It's not as simple as adapting from the McLaren to the Mercedes back when Lewis changed teams. It's not as simple as, navigating the change in tires in 2016, 2017, 2018. Clearly not. Not to mention, it's 2025, That's when Lewis won his third world championship 10 years ago now. Pretty much Lewis Hamilton in his prime. So when you talk about adaptability, 10 years is a long time. Imagine the difference in technology, in car development, in tire development. So many things are different for Lewis now. If he wants to compete with these younger guys, he's going to have to do things different. Like he said, he's been stuck in his ways. And if he is to figure this out, it's a uphill battle, and you can never take it away and say, oh, he's finished, he's slow. No, 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 no. He's adapting to something that is not really his generation of cars. And he's not a young man anymore. He's an old man. So you can never really say he's slow. No, it's just that it's more of an adoption problem. It's one thing to be slow, something Lewis has never been, but you can clearly see when the car is suited to his needs, when he's confident in the machinery, in the Chinese Sprint Grand Prix, in the Chinese Sprint qualifying, in the Chinese qualifying, when he's confident with the machine, he gets everything out of that fucking car. So it's a matter of adaptability and just time and patience. But all of these Lewis Hamilton fans who's ready to turn against him, you can fuck right off. We're not ready to give in. Even if we don't win a championship with Ferrari, can we get some pole positions? Can we get some wins? Of course we can. Can we even win a constructors? Maybe Charles can win the championship. But Lewis can help win the constructors. That's still a huge accomplishment. We're leaving with something, baby. We're driving for the red team. We're not ready to give up after 4 races. What are you? You're not a real Lewis Hamilton fan. You're a coward. You're a traitor. You're a literal coward, actually. After 4 races, you're willing to give up? Do you know how hard this man had to work to get here in 2007? He didn't just give up after 4 races. His dad didn't just give up after working 4 or 5 different jobs. Black people, we don't give up, fam. We don't give up. I don't care how dark the skies get. We don't give up. So all the fans out there who want to give up, leave his name and leave his name out of your traitorous mouth. So on one of the final notes that Lewis had to say, I've moved to a new car and it requires such a different driving style. I'm using engine braking, which we never ever used in previous years. Much different brakes. I'm on Brambos now, and I've been on CIs for the last 15 years or so. Okay, I don't really understand what that means. It's probably hinting to something. But I think when he speaks about using engine braking now, I think he means in the Mercedes, he was probably using it in such a different way. In the Mercedes, it was probably a bit more automated. Probably a bit more automated, it was probably a bit more automated in terms of the assistance and engine braking, while with the Maranello team, it's probably a bit more manual in terms of engine braking. Who knows? Maybe it's the other way around. But it's just a different form of engine braking. It's probably a bit more manual. And yes, when he gives these details of what's really going on, it's like, okay, of course it would take time to adapt and to catch up to Charles. He's doing things he's never had to do before. And you know what? In spite of all of that, he's still doing relatively well. And to that, we can end this video. So thank you all for watching, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.